Greetings Exiles, I'm Cod Raziel, and joining me today as always are Sir Reginald Amadeus Fortescue III and Frank. Say hi guys.
Hi.
And today we're just going to go over what was once a cast while channeling Blade Vortex and Righteous Fire Chieftain, which is now just a Blade Vortex Righteous Fire Chieftain. And the reason for that change was because Blade Vortex requires so few stacks to be useful now, I found it better to just self-cast it than wait for that first cast when using cast while channeling. So let's go over the passive tree, although it doesn't differ much from the last version. First of all, we picked up Tau Hua for that Helm's Way effect, and also a bit of increased fire damage per endurance charge. We then picked up Ramako, which gives us a lot of regen and a lot of fire resistance, as well as some physical damage taken as fire damage. I then picked up Namahu Flames Advance, at which point I started using Blade Vortex, as most of our damage was either converted or added as fire damage at this point, so it seemed like a pretty decent way to go. I never went pure Righteous Fire in this version because I had access to trading. And then lastly I picked up Hinekora. This gives us some fire damage leech, which gives us another avenue of life recovery, which is pretty nice. It gives us a bit of strength, which is not nothing, but it's also not amazing in this build since we only have about 500 strength. And then it also gives us a chance to cover enemies in ash, which gives 20% increased fire damage taken. The passive tree itself remains largely unchanged, except you'll notice that Avatar of Fire hasn't been picked up, and when we go over the gear you'll see why. Everything else is pretty standard Righteous Fire stuff, with the exception of Elemental Equilibrium not being there. The full passive tree will be in the path of building in the link in the description. So let's take a look at the gear that I've managed to acquire. Please note that this build is likely not finished, and once I get a bit more currency together I'll probably buy some expensive gear and see just how far I can push this build. The weapon I'm using at the moment is a Topo Tantes Tyrant Secum, which has the increased fire damage and fire damage dispels. I also got one with a large amount of attack speed and some cast speed crafted onto it. And also a bit of mana, because I found you needed a bit of mana and mana regeneration to get this thing flowing nicely. For my helm I've picked the Formless Flame. Now the reason I haven't upgraded this to the Formless Inferno yet is because, well, first of all it's corrupted, and second of all I just didn't see much need to do it yet. Perhaps later I'll upgrade it to the Formless Inferno or change it to a different helm, we'll see. For my shield, the first part of why I'm not using Avatar of Fire, I'm using Chernobog's Pillar. This gives us a lot of armor, some fire damage dispels, some fire resistance which boosts our armor thanks to the Formless Flame, and also some physical damage converted to fire. This takes care with our passive tree of 75% of our physical damage. It also gives us a 25% chance to curse non-cursed enemies with Enfeeble on hit. This is nice because when for some reason something is not cursed, it at least gets Enfeeble, which gives us a bit of defense. My Amulet, and this is pretty much the only kind of Righteous Fire build that can use this because of the flat fire damage added. I've got an Impresence, the fire version, which gives us 100% reduced flammability mana reservation, allowing us to reserve flammability for convenience. Since we don't really need Orb of Storms to proc the Elemental Overload, this seemed like a decent choice. It also gives us a bit of regeneration, some fire resistance and some life. Maddening Presence isn't that amazing, it just slows down enemies a bit. For my chest I'm using the life and percent maximum life from the temple, which also had a lot of armor. and some fire resistance to boost my armor even more. I find that these new temple chests are adequate. It's only 5 linked at the moment. That's one thing that needs to upgrade before I do a full build, guys. I want to get a 6 link and probably put in some added fire in there or something. My belt is a Belt of the Deceiver corrupted with all resist. This gives me a lot of resistances, some increased global physical damage which boosts my Blade Vortex, reduced extra damage from critical strikes, and a little bit of life. As well as nearby enemies are intimidated, stacking on top of my Covered in Ash to give me 30% increased damage taken on the enemies, and thus 30% more damage. My boots are pretty standard life movement speed boots with some dexterity crafted on them just to get that dexterity reached, because Blade Vortex is a bit dexterity hungry. My gloves, and this completes the 100% physical to fire conversion, is some Topo Tante's gloves. These were really cheap. I think I paid 2 chaos for them and crafted some attack speed on them. Really nice and really cheap. Even though Essences of Delirium are quite cheap this league as well, I decided to go for this since it allows me to use Atziri's Promise. And also, if I got a stat stick that had added as cold or something, it wouldn't be half converted and removed and whatnot. Bottom line, it all works together quite nicely right now. My rings, since I needed a lot of lightning resistance, I picked up a topaz ring with some lightning resistance and some life. And then, since my purity of fire was level 19 at the time, I picked up a +1 level of gems and life ring. I was also struggling with mana at the time, so I grabbed some mana regeneration on the ring. Should probably upgrade this, but you know, it'll get upgraded when it gets upgraded. So as you can see from this gear, there's still a lot of upgrading to be done before I can really push this build to its full potential. I'd like to get a 6 link as well as changing out that ring and getting a really nice scepter. And lastly, just my flasks. Now I'm using a catalyzed eternal life flask of staunching. I like the increased recovery rate eternal life flask for this build since it heals us quite a decent amount, and on top of this, while we're leeching and regenerating, we get yet another means of life recovery, so we heal pretty quickly most of the time. Next, I'm using a Wise Oak, not a well rolled one, but since our fire resistance is almost guaranteed to be our best resistance, this seemed like a decent choice and very easy to build around. Next, I'm using a ruby flask of warding to remove them curses. And Atziri's Promise, since we gain the physical damage as extra chaos damage and then the elemental damage as extra chaos damage, this seemed like a pretty good choice. And then lastly, a Quicksilver flask, because for some reason using a movement skill all the time feels uncomfortable to me. Okay, so let's lastly go over our gem links. In our chest we have Blade Vortex, linked with Controlled Destruction, Fire Penetration, Iron Will. Iron Will is picked because it has no mana cost multiplier and we don't have that much increased spell damage, so it turned out to be a decent choice. And lastly, Combustion. I was fiddling around with having this on Orb of Storms and things, but at the end of the day, it's better to just have it in your Blade Vortex because it has a decently low mana cost and it gives more than enough damage. The last link would probably be added fire in the current socket setup. Although if my sockets were different colors, I would probably pick up something else. But yeah, added fire seems like the most logical choice if you're going to use an armor chest. In my boots, I have Flammability linked with increased area of effect, Empower, and Blasphemy. Since we're using the Presence Amulet, we can link up our curse 7 waves from Sunday without it costing us any mana. In my gloves, Righteous Fire, linked with Elemental Focus, Efficacy, and Burning damage. In the weapon, we have Shield Charge, linked with faster attacks and Fortify. And lastly, in our shield, we have Herald of Ash and Vitality, linked with Enlighten. In terms of Vaal skills, I was using both Vaal Righteous Fire and Fire+Blade Vortex just to see which one I used more. And it turns out that Fire+Blade Vortex has more utility, and it also has a faster recovery time of only 5 seconds. So what you use this for is, let's say there's a huge pack of mobs that with an invulnerability rare right in the middle. You really don't want to get in there with your character, so you throw your Blade Vortex at it pretty much. It also helps to almost double that damage against bosses, and all in all, it's just a pretty solid choice for clearing. Definitely recommended over Vaal Righteous Fire, although you can use both. I was for a very long time, but eventually I just switched to a regular Righteous Fire. So that about sums up where the build is at now. In terms of defense versus damage, I'd say it's somewhere between the Elementalist and the Juggernaut. Things that I could face tank on the Juggernaut, I can't with this, and the kind of crazy damage I was putting out with that Elementalist, which is no longer possible by the way, is not a thing with this build. But it is a good all-rounder, and it can do pretty much all the things with enough gear investment. So I'd like to apologize for taking so long to bring this update, but it's the first time I've had something worthwhile to bring you. And I got a little sidetracked with that low-level incursion farming thing. Anyway, this video has run on long enough, so from myself, Sir Reginald Amadeus Fortescue III, and Frank, we'd like to thank you for watching. Please hit that like button and that subscribe button if you like my content. And good luck, and stay juicy. I guess I was desynced.